I think, okay, we are live.
Fantastic.
So good afternoon, Dr. Domale Keys. I thank you so much for joining us. I've got a small introduction prepared. I'm just going to go ahead now and read that. Dr. Domale Keys is an assistant professor in the Department of Women's and Gender Studies from Nigeria. Our research focuses on the experiences of Black women with violence and how they organize against it. Stemming from my own experience growing up in a community where organizing was their only way of having their voices heard by the government and others who sought to oppress them. Dr. Keys also looks at how nonviolent organization can create lasting change for communities, and she joins Steve this afternoon to talk about her work at the Department of Women's and Gender Studies. Good afternoon again, Dr. Keys. Thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you. Thank you for having me.
So why is it important to highlight the struggles of the Ogoni people in Eastern Nigeria?
Yeah, so I started this work because I was interested in the narrative about the Ogoni people and trying to, I think, supplement. So a lot of times when we talk about the Ogoni people and this struggle that they've been very successful in against multinational oil corporations, against the dictatorial Nigerian government at the time, a lot of times the story was written by men, and it's surrounding the narratives of men. So one of the primary narratives that we learn about this movement was the hanging of the Ogoni Nine, right? The Kinsarawiwa and 8 other men who were brutally hung for their participation in the movement. And so one of the questions that came to me was, I wonder, how we can, I knew that women were involved because people like my mother was involved in this struggle. So I wanted to learn more about how women were involved and what role they played in this organizing. Particularly, I was interested in the ways in which we know that the movement used nonviolent organizing. So they spoke to, they were in conversation with, in terms of the methods that they were using, they were in conversation with the nonviolent resistance methods of South Africa, the nonviolent resistance methods of the US South, right? The ways in which people like Dr. King use nonviolence to fight against segregation. And so I wanted to know how Ogoni women were using nonviolence in that particular context, because I think that we want to continue to explore how nonviolence can be used by everyday people, right? And the women that I was speaking to, many of them did not have formal education. They didn't have the opportunity to go to school. And so how was it that people who did not have this formal education, how were they still able to oust an entire corporation, right? How were they able to get them to leave their land, right? And I wanted to learn more about their particular uses of nonviolent methods.
Thank you, Dr. Keys. I'm also from Nigeria, and I remember the sensationalism of the Ogoni Nine, especially the cruel murder, or would I say state assassination of Kinsarawiwa. And no one who grew up in Nigeria in the 90s will forget his activism, his work, and legacy. So we've moved on now from Kinsarawiwa. Could you please talk to us about what it looks like right now in Ogoni land? Would you say his activism, his life made any impact? Has anything changed in Ogoni for people from that area?
Yeah, and first of all, there were people who gave their lives for this movement, right? And we don't forget that, including Kinsarawiwa and many, many, many other people. And I would say absolutely, right? Their struggle was not in vain because number one, the struggle still continues today, right? There are people who continue the struggle. And one of the things that I argue is that women played a very essential role in sustaining the movement, because there were times when men were particularly targeted by the government, and women had to be the ones who continued to carry the movement forward. And I mean, immediately in 1993, one of the things that one of the effects of the movement was that Shell became persona non grata in Ogoni land, right? They could no longer drill land in the region. Drill land. They could no longer drill oil in the region. I'm sorry.
Is that still the case today?
That remains the case, right? And now what the movement is really concerned with is reparations, right? How do we, number one, continue to press the government, continue to press these corporations who have done damage to the land since the 1950s? How do we get them to help to clean up the land and then provide adequate compensation for the lives that were lost, for the property that was lost, and then also how do we make Ogoni, how do we increase opportunities for people who were both active and the community at large? This is what the movement is really pressing for. And they've had some successes, right? So one of the successes that I talk about in the upcoming book is the ways in which, again, women at the forefront were able to take this movement all the way to the Supreme Court of the United States, and have and bring Shell to the Supreme Court and have them answer to the Ogoni people, you know, what they've done, what was their role in these murders of these men and of other people who died in the struggle. The case has also been brought in the Netherlands. Another human rights case has been brought in the Netherlands, also again, trying to hold these multinational corporations accountable for the devastation that has happened and continues to happen, that people continue to deal with. So I would say that there's definitely been a lot of success, and now the struggle is how do we get the land clean, right? That's one of the priorities. And then how do we increase opportunities for the community?
Dr. Keys, what I'm imagining that's going on in Ogoni land is, it seems to me, a problem symptomatic with the rest of Nigeria. Mm-hmm. I'm imagining since the 1990s to 2023, perhaps Ogoni land does not have running water. Perhaps electricity is still a problem. Perhaps there are no skyscrapers. Perhaps insecurity is a problem. Perhaps there's terrorism going on in Ogoni land. And my question is, where does Ogoni fit? Do Ogoni people from Ogoni see the problems as symptomatic of the deprivation and corruption in Nigeria, or they're seeing it as an isolated negligence of multi-corporations?
That's a great question. I mean, I think one of the, I would say yes, they see it as an issue in Nigeria, but I think that they also see it as an issue that is particular to the Ogoni people. And I say that because one of the struggles that the Ogoni people have had for decades is the ways in which the government of Nigeria is set up to benefit people in the majority, and really leave out and marginalize the people, the communities who are making up the minorities, right? And we know that from the history of Nigeria. So the Ogoni people are concerned with how the Ogoni community can really gain equality, gain equal voice in the nation of Nigeria. But they're also recognizing, of course, that the issue is happening on a national scale, and it's not just the Ogoni community. They're also recognizing, and they're also concerned with fighting the issue on an international level, right? What are the outside players? Who are the outside players who are continuing to cause this devastation? And so I would say, again, they're fighting for, I think, an improved Nigeria, right? As many people are. And they're also fighting for an improved Ogoni land.
Thank you, Dr. Keys. You spoke earlier on about the involvement of women, the matriarchy, I'm thinking the matriarchy. And I wanted you to reflect, and you said your mom was personally involved. I'm just curious to find out if you describe your personal involvement with your mom, your mom's personal involvement in the struggle.
If I describe it in writing, or
if you can talk more about what your mom's involvement was, because I'm imagining that because your mom was involved, that was what pulled you there.
Yeah. My well, first of all, I think it was just my identity as a woman, right? And as a woman who was interested in learning the history of her people, right?
Your parents had nothing to do with the fascination and the work you're doing right now?
It did for sure. And there are levels to it, but my family's history was definitely one of the reasons why I was interested in it. But more so, I think also I was concerned and wanting to learn more about what it meant to be an Ogoni woman, right? And the history of women's activism, Ogoni women's activism. So I've been inspired by my mom's role in the organizing. I've been inspired by my father's role in the organizing. And I just wanted to know more about what they did, what my people accomplished.
We're going to talk about your book in a second, but I just wanted to ask, Nigeria has been known for terrorism, Boko Haram, armed violence, armed robbery. Nigeria is not exactly the safest space in the universe. I hear New York may be more dangerous than Nigeria, but then you're talking about political nonviolence as well. And I'm just wondering, in that very chaotic space that is Nigeria, and I'm wondering how chaotic Ogoni is when you talk about terrorism in the north and in parts of the Midwest, Southwest. How effective is political nonviolence looking on the Ogoni and in Nigeria as a whole? If you can comment on that, please.
Yeah, nonviolence resistance has always been a radical option for making change. And I say radical because I think that the assumption would be that whoever has the biggest guns has the biggest power, right? And so the thought that you can use your voice, you can use marching, you can use songs to defeat these, a regime that has military power, multinational corporations that have the ability to, completely decimate communities. The idea that you would come at that struggle without a gun and, waving a palm frond is almost laughable, right? But one of the things that we're arguing and that I'm arguing is that nonviolence can be the force more powerful because people aren't expecting the nonviolent method, right? They're expecting you to get an army together and fight them. And so in many ways, and also there's immense options for waging the struggle, right? I look at the many different methods that are within the nonviolent school of thought that people use. And so because you have this large repertoire of methods that you can pull from, whereas, you know, if you were using violence, you probably only have a gun, right? It's been, I think, a more creative way of solving problems, definitely a way that a lot of times disarms and disengages the people who were using violence because they're just not expecting the methods that you're using. And so it again becomes this force that can really make change that we want to see, make change that we want to continue with, as opposed to completely decimating an entire community where there are no more structures left.
I'm just wondering, as part of your portfolio, women's and gender studies, if you've looked at the poverty rate, is any of this activism helping climate change activism and the rates of poverty in the region?
I think it's a work in progress. The activism is definitely concerned with the rate of poverty. That is one of the things that they are, that started the struggle in the first place, which is, well, why is this community so poor? And you know, this company that is so rich is further taking from communities that already don't have, right? Or they're already having to do without, right? All those things that you mentioned: no electricity, no running water, the life expectancy in 2011, according to the United Nations in Ogoni, was 50 years old, right? Which is devastating. And so at the very forefront of this movement, even from the beginning, was to deal with the issues of poverty in the community and the ways in which the environmental degradation further pushes people into poverty, because the land that they were depending on to raise crops for their families is no longer able to produce the same yields that it would have, you know, in the years past. And so I think the nonviolence activism and the Ogoni people's organizing is really targeting those issues, trying to make sure that the community can live and can live well.
That's a Nigerian problem as well. Okay, we're nearly at the end of this. I understand that you're part of the new academic excellence cohort. You're one of the hires of that Black academic excellence cohort at the University of Alberta, and you've written a book. Could you tell us a little bit about your book and what being a part of this academic excellence cohort means to you?
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. Yeah, so the book is meant to showcase Ogoni women's activism and meant to showcase the power that they have, even without our normal understandings of what power means, right? The way that they're able to get nations and multinational corporations to change their ways and to stop perpetuating violence in the region, perpetuating environmental degradation in the region, perpetuating poverty in the region. And so it's really meant to highlight the work that they did and the methods that they use to get as far as they have been able to get us to get. And you know, I look at the lives of the women, I look at the methods they use, I look at the changes that they've been able to make in areas like education and the economic empowerment. And then on the international scale, so I talk about the Supreme Court cases, both in the US and in the Netherlands. So again, it's meant to be something that both celebrates their work and also allows people who are thinking about using these methods to see a particular case study of how it's been effective, right? In one instance. And speaking about the University of Alberta, I mean, I'm honored to be here. I'm honored to be part of this Black Excellence cohort. And I'm excited to continue to work with community members to raise important issues that we need to continue to talk about in Canada, about the place of Black people, the place of Black immigrants in our communities, in our nation, and work towards making important changes.
Awesome, that's great. So I'm thinking the call to action from this is, how can Nigerians in Canada help, or how can Canadians in Canada help? Do you have any thoughts regarding this?
Yeah, I think we need to continue, first of all, to shed light on the struggles of Black people in Canada, Nigerians in Canada. One of the things that I noticed, and even in my short time here, is the erasure of Black people's, not just in the history of Canada, but in the very present day, right? This idea that we're here, but we're not here, and how we use the excuse of we use this erasure to further marginalize Black people in this nation and in our communities. And so I think anything we can do to collect statistics on these communities, anything we can do to really shed light on the issues, the calls, the activism of the Black community here will go a long way.
Absolutely. So it's Valentine's today. I'm just wondering, do you celebrate Valentine?
I do. I think, I'm not sure. I'm not sure. I try to. Yeah.
Celebrating today. Would you be celebrating today?
I'll probably try to do something, but yeah.
Dr. Domale Keys, you're an assistant professor in the Department of Women's and Gender Studies at the University of Alberta. Thank you so very much for joining us today.
Thank you. Thank you for having me. It's been a pleasure.
And please have a beautiful Valentine, whatever you do.
You too.